So now let's see.
And we're live. I heard it on Periscope.
Yay! Myself slightly
Oh.
bigger. Move myself
Are
over.
we live?
Should be.
Yeah,
Alright.
I just got the Periscope notification.
All right. I'll start here.
I'm
3,
just gonna
2,
let
1.
it.
Good afternoon / evening, depending on what part of the country you are in. This is about the labor, and I am your host, Joe Johnson, here with my bestest pals and the other hosts of this program, Kirby J. O'Connor. How are you doing, man?
Good. Other than the weird technical
Echo?
issues. If anybody is paying attention to, if anybody's watching consistently, I'm in a completely different location. This is my bedroom. It's way too intimate, and I have to stand because I'm using a huge TV because of technical issues.
It's just easier because your full-time job is you're a webcam model, so why move it from the bedroom when you don't have to?
Only
Kirby
fans
is Kirby's the editor of our little network of sites. Speaking of editors and networks and terrible segues, Deshaun Vaughn is here. He's the managing editor of let's just say Vikings Territory and PurplePTSD.com. See the live promotion on air. That's the kind of content you get. See how happy he is. I just made his life. How you doing, man?
That was me thinking about finally getting a haircut. It's been so long. I'm starting to feel like I have a home.
I did it. I went too far though. Hence the hat. I look like I am streaming from the Ronald McDonald House. It's it's shorn. Feels good though when the breeze hits it. We were off for about a week. We as Mike Tice called us, or a motley crew. It's hard for us to figure out how computers work and so on and so forth. But we wanted to hop into a couple of topical issues first before talking about kind of the biggest talker that we missed in the last week of us not being on the air. That being some of the key games in the 2020 schedule. I think the biggest topic right now that will dominate the rest of the offseason. I mean, especially now that Anthony Harris has signed his franchise tender, is the Dalvin Cook contract situation. And this, my eyes watering because it has as many layers as like an onion. It's such a perfect topic for analysis for talkers, for multiple articles, because you have to look at it from from different perspectives in regards to his role on the offense, the logic of team building and giving that large of a percentage of your year to your salary cap to two players, being your quarterback and your running back. His increased importance on this offense with Stephon Diggs being gone, and his ability to stay healthy and whether or not it makes sense to give a guy like Cook that much money, or the money that it's been reported that he may be looking for, which is 14-15 million a season. So I'll kick it over to you, Deshaun, and kind of, I guess the best way to start talking about this is what amount of money would you be comfortable with this team giving him?
I think I said before that my limit was 10 a season, and I actually thought that was a pretty good number. I didn't think he would come. I mean, I think it's like common knowledge that Dalvin Cook is like a top 5 running back in the NFL, but just given the injury history and given the fact that I think last year he never played more than like 65% of the snaps, something like that. I want to say if you compare him to Christian McCaffrey, who's now the highest paid back in like NFL history, I want to say Christian McCaffrey is like out snapping him like 2-1 or something insane like that.
Oh,
I think Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, and maybe like Ezekiel Elliott are like the guys that are hitting like 90% of the team snaps, or like 85. Dalvin is like all the way down here in the 60 range.
Are you
So
saying in regards to 2019 or from their career?
so that's 2019 because I think that's like the only. Last year was the only season Dalvin didn't miss significant time. With the hamstring, I think he
Hmm.
missed what, a month or so, about 4 or 5 weeks,
He
and then
missed 16 of his first 32 games, so he
right.
played
So
50%.
and then even last year, he still missed what 1 or 2 games or something. I mean, I
Yep.
know he had the
He
rest game.
he missed. I think he missed 2 games, but he wasn't usable in 2 other games.
Right. So that being said, I just think you can't invest that kind of money in a player who isn't consistently healthy, no matter how good they are. So I mean, I still think he deserves like 10 M because when he's on the field, he proves that he can carry the offense most of the time. But he can't if you're not consistently healthy. We just cannot pay you that much. I mean, Alexander Madison looked good enough to play 60% of the snaps like he did, and
Yeah.
uh, and running backs grow on trees, unfortunately, and we still got Mike Boone. So
And doesn't that's I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I expected a lot of people just to be like, that's a crazy take to not say give him what he wants. He's that special. Um, with Kubiak and Dennison being promoted to even higher amounts of responsibility on this offense, and them being kind of acolytes of the Mike Shanahan system, which, like you just alluded to, that was like growing running backs on trees, 1,000-yard running backs.
right.
How much? I mean, I don't want to take away from what Dalvin did in 2019 because I do think he's extremely talented and extremely good. That having been said, how much production would they really lose if it was Alexander Madison, who is a poor man's Dalvin Cook in a lot of ways? Um, and how much would the money differential be? You could Madison on his rookie deal in the round that he was drafted in versus a guy getting, I guess the team valued him in the $8 to $10 million range. Him and his agent want 14 to 15 million. I just can't imagine the production drop off would be that different with the coaching set that they have on the offensive side of the ball now, and the fact that they do have a guy who they can put in there right now who will emulate him at least better than, let's say, the drop off between AP and Toby Gerhart was back in the day. Kirby, what do you think about that, or just what Deshaun had said?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to lose enough production. This is kind of the unfortunate thing for running backs in today's NFL. I don't think you're going to lose enough production to justify the money, unless you're Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, honestly, I think is the only back right now that I would pay anywhere close to that money, and that's mostly because of his versatility as both a running back and a wide receiver, essentially. I think you lose a little bit in the screen game. Alexander Madison does an okay job of catching screens, but like I said, the only person who does screens better than Dalvin Cook is maybe Christian McCaffrey, um, and even that's questionable. Um, it's really hard to justify that much money on a running back in today's NFL
Period.
unless he's period. Even prime AP in this day and age, it would be hard to justify that money because AP had shortcomings as well. I think a guy like
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey is the only one who's going to come close to justifying that money because he's a 3 down back who can do it all. He doesn't have the running as like an AP, but like his catching is so good that you're essentially paying like you're essentially having an extra receiver on the field at all times. Um, so I think I just, and with the injury history, I valued Cook at 8 million, on the low end.
Wow.
Like that, I don't think you should pay him more than that, just because we kind of saw it. We kind of saw it in 20. It must have been 2017, where Cook went out, and then we used Latavius Murray very effectively.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, you're not going to have as many home runs hit by your running backs, but you can definitely make things work with kind of like what Deshaun alluded to, Mike Boone and Alexander Madison. And as much as I'm not high on him, you can make things work with Amir Abdullah if you can set him up in the screen game correctly. He is an excellent catcher of the football, and he's excellent in the screen game. So
yeah, I Abdullah, man, it's just hard to see the difference between what a stud he was in college and what his pro career has been. I mean, he's not built for the NFL physically. That's not a big shocker to anybody, but he was so good at Nebraska that it's just hard to not see him being effective, 5 touches a game. Yeah, I mean, and then the other reality of it is looking at this team, assuming they're going to not go over 10 million. There are teams who will pay him that much. I think we would all agree on that. And Dalvin Cook's, he will get paid somewhere. It just raises all sorts of questions about the path of this team and saying, man, if you look at the team we had in 2019 versus the team that we may have in 2021, Diggs gone, Cook gone, a lot of the guys on the defense being gone. The more I think about it, the more I wonder why you would extend Cousins in the first place. I'm making a lot of assumptions here about Cook not being here, but I still have trouble, and this is a good segue into getting into the schedule with some of the people on our team and elsewhere that are saying this is an 11-5, 10-6 type season when there's just so many question marks, and those question marks, if you apply them to when they were question marks most recently, we get some answers that might not necessarily say we're just going to bounce back in a really weird off season and have this season on par with last season or the year before even. It just feels like why have a quarterback that literally has a $45 million season coming that'll be confirmed if he's not cut by the first weekend next season, which they won't do because of all the dead cap money, when you're this close to really just being in a full-blown rebuild. Am I just making weird connections here?
You're not off base. I think it's a totally justifiable question, because nobody goes into a rebuild. Everybody tries to dump as much contract as possible with people that aren't going to be part of the keystones in the next rebuild. Nobody does that, and it seems like we're setting ourselves up to do that for some reason. But I think it maybe has something to do with the history of the team, and Rick Spielman's regime specifically, and the fact that Kirk Cousins is the first quarterback they've had that has been their guy for longer than a season.
Yeah.
And that guy was supposed to be like Teddy Bridgewater, but obviously freak accidents.
Or Ponder and his marketing degree.
Ponder and his terribleness. But yeah, it's just, I think they're looking to keep continuity at that position, which if they do go into a full-blown, rebuild, doesn't make much sense unless the idea is that you see what you can do this season. I don't think they're, any better than an 8-8 team. I don't think they're necessarily much worse. I mean, Joe and I know we disagree on this a little bit. I see them winning at least 7 games, if not 9 to 10. But I don't think they're going to drop off completely. That said, I don't think they're a championship contender by any means, with all the question marks. But it's weird that you're not. I don't know. Maybe they're going to try a different strategy and they're going to let their quarterback sit while Cousins endures another 2 years of being the team being mediocre, which isn't not a terrible strategy, but it also takes away all your mobility to go out and grab young players in free agency who you can make part of your cornerstone that people have let go for contract reasons.
This is also.
Hold on, I wanted to cut in real quick.
Okay.
So, So I was actually looking at this the other day, and I tweeted something about this. But the Vikings have like really quietly set themselves up to have like an absolutely massive 2021 season. So if you look at it, even with Kirk Cousins' contract, and they decide not
Like
to,
in regards to free agency or having money available.
yeah, money available, just straight up success. Because if you look at the draft picks, I want to say they're already on the book for 10 to 12, like already before anything is happening. We're expecting a third for Trey Waynes, I believe. We're expecting, I think, a sixth for Mac Alexander and maybe like a seventh for somebody else. And then on top of the fourth round pick that we flipped and like, well, whatever we have, it's already at like 12. And then for the books, we're expected to let go of Riley Reef next year for Ezra Cleveland to start. That alone puts the Vikings at $44 million in cap space. But you also have to think that we're likely going to extend Anthony Harris if he wants to be here. So that's going to bring us back down to about the 32 million range. And then there's Shamar Stephen, there's Kyle Rudolph if you want to move on. So that leaves us with about 36 million in cap space to do whatever we want and about 12 picks in the draft. So having Kirk Cousins here as, I mean, you know what you're going to get out of Cousins. You know your Cousins is not going to turn in this terrible like Case Keenum like season, or he's not going to turn into Baker Mayfield where he's up and down. You're going to get this consistent play out of Cousins.
But
and that's just
Deshaun, Twitter told me he's terrible.
Twitter tells me every day he's terrible. You know, I'm starting to believe it sometimes.
Twitter tells me I'm terrible.
But I mean, I think his whole season, Cousins has been around this, 25 touchdowns, 12 picks, 27 touchdowns, 10 pick mark. And I mean, we've seen him start to inch to be better since he's joined the Vikings, but I kind of feel like that's the space he's always going to be in. But it's good. It's good enough. And we finally have the space with Cousins on the team to fix the things that need to be fixed. I mean, if we go into the season and the line is terrible, we now have money to go after guys like Joe Thuney, Brandon Sheriff, or if the line is great, we can go out and get a big-time pass rusher, Jadeveon Clowney, and maybe Everson Griffin if he signs a one-year contract. We have the money to make 2021 like a massive season, and the best thing about it is Brian O'Neill is I think that's his last year of his rookie contract. We can extend him without paying any extra money. We are set up big time for 2021, and I think
that might not even take into account like the 10 to 12 million each year they add an additional cap space.
Yeah, and that doesn't even and that is expected to happen because I'm thinking because they have Kirk Cousins on the book for 45 million in 2022, so I'm thinking they're expecting the cap to go up pretty well so that his like cap percentage number is still the same. So
that was always my argument about the 30 million a year, because by year 3 going up 10 million as the minimum, it's like, well, it's basically flush from that amount of money.
Right. Basically the same thing. So
that takes away from what I was going to ask, which was, or at least say, which is, in all 3 of our lifetimes, I'm the oldest guy on the show by far, even though I look great. That the Vikings have never been, outside of 2011, just awful. They don't put together 2 or 3 year spans where they're getting top 5 picks. Matt Khalil was the highest pick in franchise history, and that was a 4th overall. And so, as big of a Cousins guy as I am, I just thought that if they can put together a couple of bad seasons, and I can't believe that's what I'm arguing here. This is just a thought experiment, I guess. It might be nice that might be one of the reasons why we've never been able to draft and develop a quarterback, is because we never have those high picks. That having been said, you guys spend a lot more time on like Vikings Twitter than I do, so I could be completely wrong here, but I feel like now that people have had time to digest 2 seasons of Cousins' number, guys like Nick Olson or Reef, who are respected in the realm of analytics, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the tide is turning a little bit and people are starting to appreciate Cousins a little bit more.
From an analytical standpoint, Cousins is a good quarterback. I think it's always been that Cousins doesn't always pass the eye test. Because if you look back on, I think our first game against Green Bay, he throws this horrible corner pass to Kevin King, and
Yeah.
that's what people remember. Cousins doesn't always, or I can't remember what game it was, but when he slid like 2 yards before the first down, when he had open running space, that's what people
City, I think.
that's what people remember. Cousins doesn't always pass the eye test, but when you pull up analytics, Cousins is a bona fide top 10, top 12 quarterback in the NFL. And I think people are starting to come around. But the question is, if the Vikings turn in a 5-11 season, they get a top 10 pick, do you make the team better or do you draft QB of the future?
Yeah, that's it's a good question, and it also raises the question: do you trust Spielman to make that pick? Not the decision per se, but the pick of the quarterback of the future. I don't think Spielman's going anywhere, but I I just think his track record on the offensive side of the ball is not as great as this draft guru or draft genius label that people give him is implying. I think a lot of his picks on defense have been amazing. I think Zimmer's had obviously a big hand in that. But if you look at the wide receiver picks he's had, they've for the most part all been terrible. He's ignored the offensive line for the most part. You can't really blame Teddy on him, but the Pounder was a panic move that most people knew wasn't gonna pan out. I mean, when you hear the best thing about your quarterback is that he graduated in 2.5 years and is super smart, it's like, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know.
I think the tough thing with quarterbacks is that in any draft, you almost have to reach for a quarterback because you just don't know who's going to take. Like Jalen Hurts had no business going to the Eagles, like at all in the second round. So when it comes to the quarterback position, you just kind of have to have your heart set on a guy and you just kind of have to keep it there. And we don't always get lucky to where, like, I think we had like 2 drafts where there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys bona fide top 10, and you don't always get that. I mean, it might even make it harder because looking back at the other draft, I mean, Baker Mayfield took a dip. Josh Allen can't throw the ball deep. Sam Darnold's team sucks, and Josh Rosen barely even plays anymore. So I just think drafting a quarterback, to me, I think is more about luck, really, than it is really analyzing the skill. I mean, there are certain guys where like, oh, he's not a first-round pick. He's more of a development kind of guy. But when you have this high pick, it's so tough to hit on these players. I mean, and not everybody can have Andy Reid for Patrick Mahomes, and not everybody can have what's the guy's name? The Colts guy, the head coach who's like this great quarterback guy. It's hard to have. Not everybody can have these guys. So.
Well, it's also about not just the coach situation. It's about the idea that, like, and this is what I call the Cleveland Browns problem, where like you can't expect a guy to come in and start day one on a terrible team because it'll ruin him. And it's why Patrick Mahomes is as good as he is because he got to sit behind Alex Smith for like at least a little bit. So just to add to that.
Right. So next year, actually, Kirby, question. Next year, it's I'm not huge on college during the season, but next year I want to say it's Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, kind of the top 3.
Those are the top 3, yeah.
So if there was one of them are there, say the Vikings have a top 10 pick and one of them is in reach, do you take one or do you go more defensive end or interior or?
Unless they somehow end up with the first or second pick and Trevor Lawrence is on the, like, somehow doesn't get picked first overall, I wouldn't take Lance or blanking on the name. I wouldn't take either of the other two in the top 10 for the Vikings. Personally, you can disagree with me, I guess, but
wouldn't that be something though, like from a perspective of what we do for a living, having the number 1 overall pick and using it on a guy like Lawrence and going to camp and
oh man,
I mean, granted,
that would rejuvenate. That'd be crazy. That'd be like the most exciting time in Vikings it'd be like Randy Moss all over again. Everybody would be so excited.
It would be, man.
It'd be like 100 times bigger than Teddy Bridgewater, which was already big.
That's I was gonna say, like, the emotional attachment people would have to that pick would be
Right.
incredible. You know, I mean, I'm 35. We haven't had really anyone like that. Um, I mean, Teddy, obviously, but I'm thinking like Culpepper was the closest thing, and for whatever people didn't like him, um,
He has small
for whatever
hands.
reason. Yeah, and he bought that horrible giant diamond encrusted pepper. Um, anyway, let's get into some of the key games of the 2020 season. We thought we would start with just looking at the matchups in the NFC North. Not necessarily a week by week, but just as each team, and the first game of the season being the against the Green Bay Packers. I've heard a lot of people, you know, I kind of want your guys' take on facing the Packers in the first week. I think some people think that it's too early. I mean, I personally like it. I think it's a good litmus test to see where both teams are, which kind of may negate the ability for it to be a litmus test because you don't really know. Like when we beat the Falcons, what was that, 2 years ago to start the season, and we're like, wow, look at that.
Last year.
And then it was like, yeah, was that last year?
That was
Yeah, we
last year.
came out and we
He
rolled
beat
them.
up on the Falcons. He blew them out.
Yeah, and it seemed like this great thing, and then it was like, oh yeah, the Falcons are garbage. We shall see. I mean, there's obviously all this drama in Green Bay, or some say it's not actual drama. I don't know what you guys' takes are on that, but I think from a litmus test perspective, going up against a guy like Rodgers that early, who has shown a propensity to pick on young corners whenever the Vikings have had Holton Hill in, or the touchdown he threw against that like fourth string, was it Chris Boyd maybe last season. He just picked on him the whole drive and threw a touchdown. Anyway, it should show us where we're at from a DB perspective, which I think again will be a good test to see what to expect from this defense moving forward.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good matchup. I don't like the matchup. So we're like right before the schedule came out, I was like, as long as we don't get the Packers like week one, we're good. And we ended up getting the Packers week one. But I just think their team, as the way their team is built now, is like almost built specifically to beat us, because like their strengths is our weaknesses and our weaknesses are their strengths. So like we now have like a pass rush issue now that Everson Griffin and Stephen Weatherly are gone. I think we actually just finished my article on it, which I'm going to post later. We lost about 35% of our pass rush productivity this offseason, which is a huge number to lose in one offseason. So that we have that number one. We have this super young secondary where I think everybody except for the safeties are like under like 24 or 25, which is, and then probably 3 of our top 4 safeties are going to be in their first NFL game played against a Hall of Famer and Devontae Adams. So, and then on top of that, our offensive line going up against Kenny Clark and Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. I mean, we could surprise people, come out and play a very good game and be good, but that's just not what I'm expecting. I'm kind of expecting us to, I don't want to say roll over, but it's just there's too many chances for mistakes to happen with all these young players to be playing a team that's like that went 13-3 last year. And I mean, even though they weren't like super good, they're still veteran players all over that team, and it's just not a great matchup from like a football perspective for week one.
Yeah, that Monday Night Football game late in the season last year, where Zadarius Smith was essentially in the backfield before like the ball's even handed off to Mike Boone, was as big a testament to why, not to keep harping on the offensive line thing, which I always do, but he almost single-handedly disrupted the entire offensive game plan. It was astounding, and I haven't seen anything that will change that outside again of like Cleveland moving to left guard, I guess. But you're not wrong, man. I mean, I as Kirby has alluded to, am not bullish on the 2020s or at end of the season record. Sorry. I'm
Yeah.
more in the 5-11, 6-10 range. I just think again the main weaknesses that we had weren't really improved upon. I think there's too much youth in positions that take too long to develop under Zimmer, and losing Diggs is just going to be ugh. So yeah, I guess looking at 2019 being this culmination of team building between Zimmer and Spielman, going 10-6, I just can't see them getting anywhere near that. But that's just me. But I agree with you.
I'd like to comment on getting the Packers in Week 1. Because personally, I totally agree with Deshaun that like it's a terrible matchup for us, and like it's gonna be probably a bad football game. But I love getting the Packers in, first of all, Week 1 and Week 8. As like a fan and like as someone who has to deal with all the other Vikings fans, because we'll just get it out of our system, like the Week 1 baloney of playing the Packers, and like it feels almost like if they come out and they surprise them and they play well, we'll have hope. But if they come out and they kind of get rolled or whatever, then it's just like, okay, that one's out of the way now. We can go forward and just try to be better, and like we can try to enjoy the season. Because I personally I hate playing the Packers at all. But it's not because of the teams playing; it's because of the attitude of our fans around those games. And like that's a terrible like reason to not like that. But fully agree that it's probably going to be a bad game for us, and it does not look good on paper at all. But I like that it's Week 1 because we get it out of the way, and there's always the possibility Week 1 is a fluky week where you have people win who don't necessarily deserve to win those games.
Yeah, I think the Packers
So are you
always
not a
come out
fan
pretty.
of the?
What, Joe?
Oh, I was gonna say in regards to what you're alluding to with not liking the Vikings fan base during Packers weeks. I was gonna ask if you're like not a fan of the FTP meme stuff going on, or what aspect of it you don't like.
FTP. FTP. Oh no, I like the rivalry. I like the trash talking and everything. I absolutely hate how down on our own team that quote unquote fans get during those weeks, especially. It's bad with the Bears too, but not nearly as bad as when they lose to the Packers. Because I think there's such an emotional attachment to this rivalry for people that
Yeah.
they like you lose to the Packers and that's the only thing that matters to them. And I'm just like, okay, but there's still 16 more weeks in the season. Well, 15 more weeks in the season that we don't play the Packers. So like those aren't do or die just because we lost to the Packers once or twice. So I basically don't like Vikings fans.
We all come to that conclusion at some point. Um, yeah, I think Deshaun, you were going to say they usually come out of the gate pretty strong, at least under Rodgers. I remember when I was in college, there were a few years in late high school where I remember one season in particular, it was right after Halloween. I went to Madison for that big Halloween thing, and there was a riot that they blamed on the U of M people, which was entirely true. And we went to get breakfast, and I kept holding up my fingers like this to this guy who was staring at me because I had Viking stuff on, because they started 2-4, and I think that was the season we were 6-0. And guess which one of those teams ended up making the playoffs? The Packers. Nothing is out of the realm of possibility for them. They always seem to bounce back or come dig themselves out of a hole or find another Hall of Fame quarterback. Um, but it'll be a good talker, I guess, to start the season. The Bears are also an interesting 2020 team. The world was their oyster at this time. Last season, they were a double doink away from, in their fans' minds, making it to the promised land, and then things kind of fell back down to earth. People went from thinking Nagy was the second coming to saying he should get fired. Um, where do you stand on that game, Mister Vaughn?
So a lot of people say the Bears got worse, but I don't think they did. I mean, they got Foles, who's like a at least competent cornerback because Trubisky has kind of proved to like not know how to play the position half the time. And then they brought in Robert Smith, not Robert Smith. What's it? Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn, who I think he went for what, like 60 pressures and like 12 sacks last year. On top of already having Khalil Mack, which is kind of insane. So on top of having Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman and Robert Quinn, that defensive line is crazy. Like it's insane. And they still have a solid. And he just picked up Jalen Johnson in the draft, and they still have Kyle Fuller. So that defense got a lot better by adding in Robert Quinn, and that's really the only part that's ever bothered us. Their offense has never been a reason why we've lost to them. But I think like within the last like 6 years, every time we lose to the Bears, it's always been because their defense has held us to what like 14, 16 points.
Except when they had Jay Cutler and he would go off for like 4 touchdowns and 350 yards.
Yeah,
so,
they traded 2 first-round picks for him too.
So when I was doing my
the Vikings
prediction, actually kind of had us taking a game against the Packers, but I had us being swept by the Bears again, and fans definitely did not like that. But unless our offensive line sees significant improvement, the way their defensive line saw a pretty big improvement, I don't really see us beating them unless we can find a way to overcome that, which I mean we haven't in the last like 2 years. But maybe with Kubiak now as the play caller, he could find a way around it to neutralize the pass rush and the run defense, because we just haven't been able to find the answer.
Yeah, that raises all sorts of questions about, when I had Mike Tice on my podcast and looking at how these teams, as you said earlier about the Packers, are really built as a response to one another. The Vikings went out and drafted Xavier Rhodes because he was 6'2", and really just to combat the quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford. At the time, it just feels like the Vikings are the only team offensively that don't tend to do that. You think that going against, again, especially that Monday Night Football game against the Packers, and then looking at what you just listed as this terrifying defensive line, and the fact that Vikings always play bad in Chicago, so that they're probably not going to win that game, even if they're favored by 30 points. Chad Greenway said literally that we look at each other going into Soldier Field and say, we're going to fuck this up. We always fuck it up. It's like they openly talk about it. And so it does get a little frustrating to look at that aspect of it, because it just, the best case scenario, like you just said, is gimmicky, or get points that we reached last season with Cousins and saying, why don't they roll them out of the pocket every single passing down? That's, you can't sustainably win if you can't have your quarterback throw out, like a quarterback normally would. And so, I can't imagine them not just getting dominated. I mean, Khalil Mack, more than any player in the NFL, scares me. His ability to take over a game against the Vikings is a consistent that we're going to have to deal with till he's gone. And the reaction thus far from Egan has been underwhelming at best. What do you think, Kirby? I feel like a 70s talk show host, like smoking and asking in-depth questions.
I'm not, well, like Deshaun. I don't think they're going to be favored in either games against the Bears. I think this is where like the 8-8 like comes in to play, because I think they're going to lose at least 3 if not 4 games in the division. They're like 500 in the division is going to be amazing, even playing the Lions twice, which is bad to think about. Like 3 or 4 is the most they're going to win in the division. So like they're going to be bad there. So I think they likely lose both against Chicago as well. I don't know. It's tough to say because I don't think Chicago is going to be great. I think their offense is going to be mediocre at best. But like Deshaun said, if you get decent quarterback play for one game, for both of those games, like you are going to win because your defense is just going to be. I don't know if they're going to have the turnover differential that they had in 2018. We saw that that's unsustainable, even though all the Bears fans told me it was sustainable. Um, but I think even then, like, you don't have to be great on offense to win those games because I think we're going to have issues dealing with them. And unless Kubiak can figure out a way to neutralize all of those guys and, like, or they're racked by injuries by the time we play them, I don't. It doesn't look good on paper.
Yeah, I think if they're gonna get to 500, they're obviously gonna have to sweep the Lions. I've been hearing a lot of talk this offseason about essentially this being Patricia's last year. There's a lot of reported consternation from the locker room, and he's made some. I think he's made some of the errors that other former Belichick assistants have made, which is going into a new team and acting as if you're Belichick without earning that respect from the team and letting guys go for character issues who are really good, like um, what Slay, I think, right? Who else did he let go? Quinn. Either way, a
Yeah.
few players came out. Amendola, I think yesterday or the day before, and talked about how much they love him and how much the locker room loves him as a coach, and that's usually not a great sign when you need team leaders to do that. So I could see from a Lions perspective, things turning sideways relatively quickly for them there, and that could be to the benefit of the Vikings. I mean, outside of last season, they've, for whatever reason, seemingly struggled against the Lions. Stafford has had really, really good games against them. So
Well,
I get, yeah.
It's
Well,
the classic like Vikings like the game is close up until the last 2 minutes, and that's when Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback in football almost.
yep.
So I think that's why it's been they've been so competitive during Stafford's time, just because they keep it close and the Vikings keep it close, and then Stafford brings them back. So, but
What
I
do you
don't
think
think we'll see
next year,
that.
Vaughn? This year? No.
No, I don't think we will. I think Stafford's not over the hill. He's going to be serviceable for sure, but I don't think he's going to be able to carry the team like he has in the past, especially in those 2 minute drills.
Ooh, I'm interested in. Let's hop into some of the non-divisional games. Since I think I'm there's like a whole mini series going on of mysteries in Deshaun's camera. Obviously there's two really big non-divisional games that people are talking about, that are going to be huge from a ratings perspective in Vikings land. The Panthers game with the return of Minnesota's favorite quarterback of all time by far. And if you disagree with that, you might die. In Teddy Bridgewater, and then you have the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers coming here, or we play them there.
We play in
But seeing
Tampa.
the new look, do we? Oh yeah, I knew that because I made a joke about it at some point. Um,
Tampa also
I
has now has Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tyler Johnson out of the University of Minnesota.
yeah,
So I'm sure that'll get a lot
that
of people excited.
you know, this is gonna be a very quick and stupid take, I'm sure. But I feel like if your goal was to in the draft to get a receiver who can move the chains but isn't necessarily um, any sort of down the field threat, more of a one-dimensional possession guy, why not just get Tyler Johnson in whatever round he was taken in the middle of the draft, as opposed to taking Justin Jefferson with your first overall pick? Because I can't imagine their efficiency or their stats will be much different. Especially, well, it might be skewed by the fact that it's Tom Brady throwing him the ball, but you're not stretching the field with Justin Jefferson. You're not getting any outside production. It's going to be all across the middle. He's going to be good at contested catches, but that means also that he'll, for the most part, be tackled right after catching the ball. Tyler Johnson is slow. I understand that, but he's the type of guy who puts good tape out there, is a competitor. Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
I mean, I get your argument. I think Jefferson's going to be better at the next level than you think he is. I think the talent difference, and we've seen it between Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman, like at the U already. Like Tyler Johnson has been the best receiver that the Gophers had since Eric Decker. But then Rashad Bateman showed up and showed just how much better he is. Um, so I think like the talent level is completely different. Also, I think Tyler Johnson. I think Tampa like went up a little higher than anybody expected. Like I know Tyler Johnson was expected to go in that round, but I think going to Tampa was unexpected. I think he was gonna drop a little farther, like expected to drop a little farther, and then also just I don't know. I think with the way the Vikings saw their need with Diggs being gone, like I know Jefferson is not a replacement for Diggs in any manner, but I think they had to make a move in either the first, second, or even the early third for a receiver. Because I like Tyler Johnson, I just don't think he's going to be as good as those top tier guys
Yeah,
are.
I mean that my argument needs the addendum that I would have preferred that they went after
Denzel Mims.
Denzel Mims. Yeah, just based on his ability to stretch the field and be a large. I mean, the one thing from looking at his scouting profiles was an elite and unique combination of size and speed, and his body control. Some of his highlights reminded me of Randy Moss, just sideline catches and ballerina like body control. But yeah, I don't want to keep harping on the Jefferson thing, but I think it is, you know, taken in the fifth round. I think that's probably a testament to him being a consistent possession guy that Brady can get the ball to. Getting into Brady, I don't watch a lot of AFC football. Do you think that if the Vikings had Tom Brady in 2019, they could have won the Super Bowl
No.
because of the line in San Francisco?
Yeah. No. There's
Yeah.
no way. Like I
How
think
about
Brady
2017?
2017, there's a very good case. I think Brady, and this is why I don't like. Well, I understand the hype from the media because Tom Brady is the poster boy of the NFL still, and like everybody's so crazy about him. I don't think Tom Brady makes the Buccaneers that much better than they already were. Like I think he does give them more. Like he's more solid. He's much more steady than Jameis Winston. He's gonna give you a lot more consistent play. And with Gronkowski,
Didn't
they get
Winston have like 30
30
touchdowns and
touchdowns
30
and 30
interceptions?
interceptions.
The
Exactly.
Bucks
Yeah.
are going 16-0.
The Bucks are going 16-0 with Tom Brady.
Woo!
Only if the refs help them on every single offensive possession. Um
That very well could happen.
but like I don't see it. I don't see the hype. Like obviously I see why the media, like the NFL network and everybody is pushing that narrative because of it's Tom Brady and we can sell Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski coming out of retirement. But as far as like actual like looking at the actual football aspect of it, I don't see Brady being that big of a difference maker in Tampa.
What do you think, man? And also, I don't know if you heard the question, but do you think the Vikings could have won the Super Bowl in 2017 if they had Tom Brady? I initially asked 2019, but we both agreed that with that line and uh, that team called the 49ers, yeah, no. Sean, oh,
Easy.
He had a good run.
He had a good run.
Let's get into the Panthers game. We alluded to Teddy earlier, because it seems like he still comes up every show regardless. I as we said earlier, there's never been a player on this team, not even Randy Moss, that has elicited the amount of emotional just connection and support and justification than Teddy did when he was here. And long story short, one of the main reasons these sites exist in the first place and went from me really just doing this as a hobby to what it is now is Bridgewater and my the fact I wasn't sold on him as this default elite receiver really up until the 12 hours or so before he got injured. I actually wrote an article that I bet I could find and post on the site, the message board, that said, okay, the headline was, okay, I admit it, Teddy is the future or the franchise. I don't remember which, but my gripe with him was basically that he was not great or basically pretty terrible at throwing the ball down the field. He didn't get enough air underneath it because he kind of had a weird throwing motion. Tommy Kramer talked a lot about that on the podcast that he came on back then. And it's something that he was working on that offseason. I saw him working on it at training camp, and he was seemingly dropping dimes in those preseason games. Mike Wallace, I think if he would have been here and Teddy hadn't been injured that season, things could have been a little bit different because there were times in that 2015 season where Wallace was wide open, but Teddy would just overthrow him with these line drives. So I guess I'm interested to see what he can do as the full-time guy in Carolina. They have obviously McCaffrey, like we talked about. They have enough for him to show where he's come based on what we've seen, not just in limited help like he was last season. I also think that could be an abject nightmare for anybody like me on the internet who will have all these Teddy Bridgewater stands just crying over the spilt milk that is Teddy being gone.
Well, you don't even have to play well for people who don't like Cousins to. Sorry, not to say that Teddy Bridgewater fans are necessarily wrong, but you don't even have to play well for people who don't like Kirk Cousins to like try to justify you coming back. A la Case Keenum went to two different teams in 2 years and was terrible on both of them, and I still see occasionally people going, "We could add Keenum for that money."
Yeah, I see that all the time. Actually, should have never got rid of Keenum. I mean, but I do think that one of the main aspects of what we saw from Teddy, it can be summed up in a quote from Zimmer, which was, I tell him all the time, or I wish he could play the start of the game like he does the final 2 minutes of every game, because he was always such a gamer at the end of games. He just had no expression, super chill. Like, he just had that ice water running through his veins that up until maybe the Saints game we didn't see from Cousins. But it's also a question as to whether or not his body will hold up for the entire season. That's a little scary.
Well, and I alluded to this in my article about Joe Flacco, actually. I always thought that they had like, it's funny that Zimmer made that comment, because it always felt to me like they had Teddy on rails. Like they had him on like you're outside with your dad and he's got your training wheels on, and they're just like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna hand off 60% of the time, and then occasionally you'll throw a curl route or a slant or something like that. And then towards the end of the game, they were like, okay, now we have to try to win. So they take the training wheels off and they say, go out and do it. And he played very well. So I think that was as much a factor of coaching as anything. So I think,
not to mention that he had quasi peak AP to hand the ball off to, and a lot
It's
of
true.
his development was stymied. That's at least the argument that I hear all the time was, he's not being allowed to flourish because they're running the ball so often to AP.
Yes and no. I think it was more about the fact that they didn't let him essentially run the offense. Like, yeah, part of it probably was they were trying to give AP his touches, but you could have still let Bridgewater take advantage of passing situations more than they did, because it was often everybody gives him crap as Teddy check down, whatever, but like more often than not, they gave him one read deep, and then the only other read was like check down.
Yeah,
So
it almost felt at times that they were running some of those deep routes, not sarcastically, but almost like they had to, just to keep the defense honest. But in the most, because teams do that all the time, but in the most or least genuine way possible. Like there was no way that play was going to work. They're just doing it, I guess, to justify Mike Wallace's contract at the time, or the 5th-round pick they sent to get him. I don't know. Um, I think we should end it with, since you brought it up, and because I think this will be a good segment for those listening to the entire show. We're gonna each week cut the show into segments, and then you can find them on YouTube. And one of the bigger articles we've had this month was from you, Kirby, about how Flacco is a good fit for the backup.
there you
You
go.
know, people really latched onto that on social media. Like I put like $3 behind it, and it was huge on Facebook, and a lot of one-word responses and a lot of variation in those one words. So I thought you could like elucidate on that a little bit more as to what you meant. And
I mean, yeah, I stand behind everything that I put in that article, in the fact that I think Joe Flacco, for all the crap he gets, for all the like, is he questionably elite for like the years that he got that, and then now he's a free agent because he wasn't good in Denver, for all that, I think at one point in his career he was one of the top tier guys playing in bigger games. I mean, he won a Super Bowl MVP. Granted, his
yeah,
defense was incredible, but at the same time, like, you don't win MVP, if you don't do anything. So I think he would be a good backup. I mean, obviously the money is like a question that, like, you don't know how that's going to work out. But one of the big points that a lot of people like were questioning when they were like, why would you get Joe Flacco? You already have. I saw two things. I saw you already have the quarterback of the future, which I think they were alluding to Nate Stanley, which doesn't make any sense to
yes,
me.
I know. I'm like, what are they talking based on what?
And the other one was Joe Flacco's not any better than Sean Mannion.
Yeah,
Um, Sean Mannion is I respect the guy as a football mind. I respect him as a person. He's not a good football player. Like, no matter
He's
which one
terrible.
he's just awful. He doesn't bring anything to the table other than, I think he's kind of a yes man to Kirk Cousins on the sideline. Like, yeah, he's there to analyze film and like he can point some things out, but I think he's also partly there to stroke. And this is like, I didn't write this in the article, but this is like a thing that I have going on in my mind. I think he's partially there to stroke Kirk Cousins' ego, because like we've kind of seen it. Like, Cousins has kind of a fragile ego. Like, he gets criticism and he responds to it a lot, and like I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to like want to shut your haters up and everything. But it seems like every single week he's responding to something on his podcast or whatever. And I think with Mannion there, and partially I think the reason that Sloter got let go was because Mannion's not going to make any waves. And I think bringing in Flacco would make waves. So I think that's why, one of the big reasons why the team wouldn't do it. But on paper, on the idea of if he works with Cousins and is able to mentor him in those big game situations, he's just as good as Mannion as holding a clipboard. And if you ever needed him to take the field, he would be about 100 times better than Mannion, who couldn't,
yeah,
who essentially got the game, almost handed to him by Chicago and couldn't win it in week 17.
yeah.
Granted, that was also Mike Boone's fault for turning the ball over twice. But yeah,
I completely agree with you. That's why I also wanted to bring it up. I know you have to run to take care of your kid or whatever. I'm so sick of hearing about that kid. Um, I hope that was obviously a joke. But I thought if Deshaun, you're back, I could let the people get your take on um, Brady in Tampa or Teddy in Carolina.
So we can start with the Panthers. Panthers are a terrible team. They're terrible. Teddy Bridgewater basically had a perfect situation in New Orleans, and that's why they went 5-0 when Breeze was out. I mean, he had Michael Thomas, he had perfect offensive line. Their defense was playing out of their minds. That's why he went 5-0. Now he's going into a situation where he's probably going to be sacked like 45 times a season. He has a bunch of speed demons at wide receiver. He's not the greatest deep ball thrower.
Yeah.
He has Christian McCaffrey, which is a good safety blanket. That's good to have. But he no longer has Greg Olsen. The defense just lost Luke Kuechly. They lost Gerald McCoy. It's not a good situation to be in, and I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is the guy that's going to come in and be like this Drew Brees like quarterback that's always going to have them going 8-8, 9-7, regardless of the talent around them. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is great, but I've never seen Christian McCaffrey win a game for the 49ers. Whenever they win a game, it's because Kyle Allen decided to be a good quarterback, or I think that was it, because I think Will Grier lost all his games. But I've never seen Christian McCaffrey win them a game. And I mean, and Teddy Bridgewater is an upgrade over Kyle Allen. I expect him to win a few, but I'm not really expecting anything more than like a 5-11 season out of them. And then moving on to Tampa Bay, I've honestly been trying to like figure out like what team in the NFL could actually defend what they have. And I mean, if you start to go down the list, the Ravens have this great defense now because they added Calais Campbell, they added Derek Wolfe, and they have this great defensive line, and then they have these great safety. They have Earl Thomas, who's kind of regressing a little bit, who actually might not even be on the team after his situation. But they have two really good corners in Humphreys and Peters, who they might be able to defend the Buccaneers. But then you have Rob Gronkowski, who's basically unguardable when he was playing.
Yeah, and he's gonna be healthy.
He's gonna be completely healthy, no back issues, no knee issues. I think the big thing with the Buccaneers is making it to the point where Brady doesn't have to throw the ball 50 times a game. I think that's going to be their issue because the defense isn't good. This defense, I mean, despite Shaquille Barrett having like 20 sacks last year, the defense still isn't that good. And they're going to give up points. When they play the Saints, it's going to be like 45-47, and Brady's going to have to basically face off against Drew Brees to see who wins that game. And Brady's like 43 now? That's just not something he can do all season. So I think the big thing with the Buccaneers is going to be to do what the Chiefs did and find some way to just get a stop or two a game, because the Bucs are probably going to come out next season and average like 30 points a game. Just because, I mean, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were unstoppable when he had Jameis Winston. And now you add someone like Rob Gronkowski, who requires double coverage, and then you add an underrated receiver in Tyler Johnson, who was great in college, who has an opportunity now to face off against fourth and fifth string cornerbacks. They have this offense that rivals the Chiefs if Brady can hold up. And that's just the biggest question. Now, like Kirby said, I don't believe they win the NFC South. I just don't. I think they go maybe 10-6, maybe 11-5, but I still see the Saints getting like a 13-3 record and winning. But they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially if they can get that defense to be competent at the least. Because you see, the Chiefs got their defense. Their defense isn't great by any means, the Chiefs, but they got it to be to a competent level, and they won a Super Bowl. And that's all the Bucs need to do is to get their defense to be competent, and then let Brady do the rest.
Here's kind of a weird question, but I don't know if you've been seeing what Michael Thomas has been doing in regards to not Devontae Adams, but Parker. Yeah, on Instagram or whatever. How would you react to that if he was on the Vikings? Would you think it's funny? Would it concern you? Would you want him to dial it back?
I mean, you can kind of compare Michael Thomas antics to like the Diggs tweets. I mean, I mean, I think as a Saints fan, I mean, as a Saints fan, you're always going to defend your guy because Thomas is a bona fide top 2 or 3 wide receiver in the NFL. So as a Saints fan, you're always going to defend your guy, but just the thing, he's like always out trying to prove himself to nobody because we all think he's great. I don't think there's a single person I don't think there's a single fan who actually believes Michael Thomas isn't good. I mean, no matter what routes he runs, we don't care that he runs slant routes. We just think it's funny to tell him that's all he does is run slant routes. We've seen him burn Marcus Peters for like 70 yards. We saw his one-handed catch in the against whoever that was. It was a great one-handed catch. But it's just when you go on Instagram and you go after a guy that plays for the Dolphins.
Yeah.
You just kind of have it coming. I mean, and I think
it wasn't even like he wasn't dragging the guy.
Right,
He just
so
said which is harder to you, and obviously he's gonna go after or answer the way he did. It's a good comparison to Diggs. I mean, there's such a fine line for wide receivers. I think where the greats do have this either chip on their shoulder or narcissism or a mixture of both. I think you need that to be motivated enough to be that guy, to put that work in, to take that pressure, to want to beat the guy opposite you, so on and so forth. It's just, some guys take it too far.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that
with social media too, it's just but it's entertaining, man.
I would agree.
He took it too far. I mean, like, you have guys who out there who know they're good. Like, you'll never see DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Adam Thielen, and Amari Cooper. I mean, every once in a while, they might get on social media and be like, oh, like, I'm better than this or better than that. But Michael Thomas is, like, consistently on the internet telling people how great he is. And it's just like, to a point, we're just going to tell you you're not if you're going to keep saying it.
Well,
I think
man.
that kind of talk is like totally justified, like in games, in practice, whatever. You want to jaw at your competition, that's totally fine. I think to go out of your way to like seek out people on the internet and like post on the internet about yourself and then like comment on it, that's taking it a little far. And I saw a lot of Saints fans justifying it as like competitiveness and like wanting to be the best. I'm like, I mean, I guess, but he could just do that on the field instead of like behind his phone, like in the off season. Shouldn't he be like doing other things right now?
Yeah. I think the weirdest part about it is I thought Devontae Parker was being like a little snarky with his comment and what he chose. But it turns out he actually caught a pass against Stephon Gilmore. They play each other twice a year. So obviously he actually caught a pass against Stephon Gilmore, and he was just commenting what he actually did. And for some reason, Michael Thomas took it as something completely different and got mad about it for some reason. And actually, and I don't know if you guys saw this on Twitter, but if you were to give Devontae Parker the same amount of targets and Michael Thomas, Parker basically blows him out of the water.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go, guys.
He said that. Oh yeah, later, man.
Yeah,
He said